So up next, we welcome to the podcast Isabelle Saint Joy. Isabelle is an academic advisor at Valencia College in Orlando, Florida. She works with students both in person and online as they work to complete their general studies degree. Her first job was with the Boys and Girls Club of Central Florida, where she realized she wanted to work with students. She has worked as a front desk staff at the University of Central Florida while earning her Bachelor of Science degree in Health Services Administration. She brings more than 5 years of healthcare administration experience to academia. Even though Isabelle did not pursue a major in education, she knew her heart would take her back to working with students at some point in her life. She has worked as an academic advisor for almost 3 years and serves on various committees at Valencia College to stay engaged and learn more about the students and staff on campus. Isabelle, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Matt. Thank you so much for having me on. I've been listening to Adventures in Advising podcast for just a couple of months now, and I was like, it would be awesome to be interviewed one day. So thank you so much for the invitation to do so.
Yeah, and speaking of that, yeah, it's like you reached out on Instagram, and we're talking about how you. Can you talk more about like what was it about that interview, or kind of what connected what connected you with that interview with Mercedes?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just found her to be extremely compelling, right? She actually moved me to action and made me feel like, am I really doing enough as an advisor? Like there were a lot of elements of that interview. I think that encouraged me just to remain engaged with work that I do. And just to remember, things shouldn't be transactional, right? We should really be impacting our students. And along the way, think about our own growth too. She had talked a lot about NACADA and getting involved. I think she'd actually mentioned submitting proposals. And although I'm not a member yet, it's something that I've been thinking about. And I think a lot of that stems from just her voice and her rationale that it's really, really important just for all of us to stay involved and really to think about our students, but think about our personal growth too. So love that.
Yeah, and Mercedes, yeah, she's on our Region 9, NACADA Region 9 steering committee, our Nevada liaison. And yeah, she's just a wealth of knowledge, has a lot of great ideas. And she did two, we call them talk stories for Region 9, but they're like more like a webinar presentation based. And she did two of them on the same day for conference proposals, and was really, wanting to share her experience of how she came from the idea to actually submitting the proposal, and got a lot of great feedback. So, I mean, definitely she's all about wanting to help others, share her experience, and to be able to connect. So I'm glad that that worked out with that interview. And if anyone listening hasn't checked it out, that's on episode 44 of this podcast. And that one's titled Finding Inspiration and Motivation. So thank you for sharing that. And can you tell me more about Valencia College and how you would describe that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for whatever reason, they said, "Hey, Isabel, we want to hire you." In May 2019, I had no advising experience, but I knew I wanted to work with students. And I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point, how I actually got here to advising. But Valencia College, oh man, we have several campuses all throughout Central Florida. And I think that's really wonderful for our students, right? You don't have to just go to one school and then, like, that's the main school. We have so many different areas. Each campus kind of has its own flavor. A lot of them also have their own specific degrees that they offer fully from that campus. So, for instance, our newest one is downtown Orlando, and we have our wonderful pastry and baking programs that are offered through that, partnered with Disney. And so it's just great for our students because that's where they can really network the best. When we think about our East Campus, they do all of our arts and entertainment. Our students are so talented. I know students in general are talented, but our students, Valencia College, I got to put hats off for them. But just in general, I would say working at Valencia has been a really positive experience for me. We're kind of going through some changes now, and that's always going to happen with an amazing organization. But myself, I am working there as an academic advisor. So I work really with our general population of students who know what they want to do for their bachelor's degrees, students who have no idea. And then also the other side of our advising includes our career program advisors. So they're helping students getting their associate in science degrees or getting one of our fabulous bachelor degrees. So just in general, Valencia offers a lot of different opportunities for students, either to direct connect to our partner university, University of Central Florida, go Knights, or, just to kind of stay here and finish up their degree. But I really love the fact that we are so versatile. We're kind of everywhere for our students. And then, of course, kind of being able to offer that, whether it's in person or online, I think has been great for our students as well.
Yeah, and especially location-wise, where you're talking about there's these connections like with Disney, so that's really awesome. So
Mhm.
that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
And many institutions, I mean, we're recording this the very beginning of February, and many institutions have kind of shifted and if they were on campus and now maybe they're virtual or remote for a little bit. I know for the university I work at, we are um, remote with our classes until the middle of February. Has things changed any at Valencia with that?
I would definitely say, of course, in 2020, we all made that big shift, right? All into online. And then for a good while, we pretty much remained that way. Really, when I think about fall 2021, I would say that's when things started opening up a bit more for us. We did start offering some of those in person sections. And so since then, right, we're kind of in spring 2022 now. We've increased that even more. So we offer in person fully for some of our classes. Some of them are still online. So we know that that's been really, really helpful for our students as well. And we don't want to just take that away. So we certainly have done that. We even have what's called real time virtual, which I think is just incredible. It gives students kind of that sense of discipline, right? Because it is via Zoom and you're expected to be in class, right? If it's Monday and Wednesday, 1 to 2:15, you need to be there signed in, but it's from the comfort of home. So for our students who are still feeling like, I don't feel totally comfortable being in a classroom again yet, but I want that discipline of knowing, ooh, Professor so and so is expecting me. Our real time virtual, I think, has done that in a really, really helpful manner. So a little bit of everything for us here at Valencia across all of our campuses.
Yeah, nice. And based off your bio, I'm really interested to hear about your journey because it seems like the roles you've had, although maybe not necessarily directly connected to academic advising, have really actually prepped you for your role as an academic advisor.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always like to think about not necessarily the career change that I made, but I like to think a little bit before that. So when I was in school as an undergrad student, I was at the University of Central Florida and I was working on my bachelor's degree in health services administration. Funny enough, while I was working on my degree, I was working for Boys and Girls Club. And that's when I knew like I should be working with students. Why am I not an education major? But you know how that goes, right? Sometimes you have external voices kind of saying, no, like this is the direction you should go in. And I had already said, well, I don't want to be clinical, but I still want to be in healthcare, I guess. So that's kind of where that major came from. When I was in my last semester, I was in my internship, and I had the amazing privilege of working with one of our larger hospital systems here in Orlando. And they said, hey, Isabelle, we know you're graduating soon. Do you want to come on board? And I said, yeah, why not? I was kind of thinking about what's my next step once I graduate. So I started working in the same place where I did my internship. But right before I graduated, I emailed my own academic advisor. And a lot of people don't know this part of the story. But I emailed my own academic advisor and I said, hey, I'm graduating soon. What would it take to be an advisor? And I'm sure that she was like stumbled when she saw that email because I really enjoyed my major. I had nothing bad to say about it. She responded and she was so sweet and so encouraging. And she said, well, that's a great idea, but don't you want to work in your field, like what you just studied and what you just finished? And I said, yeah, but I kind of want to talk to students about my experience. And that's when I knew, like, at some point I'm going to work with students. At some point I will be in an educational system working. She gave me the, hey, just kind of work in your field, see how that goes. But what kind of felt like a barrier at that time was the fact that she said most advisors at the university level have a master's degree. And I was like, well, I don't have that. So I guess this is done. And I just kind of put that idea to rest and I left it at that. I did not think about getting into higher ed once I started working in the healthcare administration field because I was always busy. You know, I was an insurance verifier for some time. I was an office coordinator for our minority business development office. And then the last role that I had in healthcare was as a credentialing specialist. So you can imagine there are a lot of parallels between that, right? So I love that you said kind of the roles I was in prepared me for what I'm doing now. I was just fascinated by helping people get through some really, really complicated processes. Becoming a physician is one thing, getting employed as such is another. So, being able to walk these clinicians through these processes, make sure we have everything in place, I'm like, there's got to be another role that does this, right? And then I was starting to get into that point where I was 6 years into working in healthcare because I wasn't clinical, I think I started doubting how effective I was. I started doubting, like, how impactful is the work that I'm doing? And I'll be honest, I did not feel fulfilled. And that's the reason that come, wow, August 2018, I said, I'm going to do something different. You know, I have no regrets about the major that I pursued. I have no regrets about the almost 6 years of healthcare administration experience that I had, but I just needed to do something that made me really jump for joy when I got up in the morning. And yeah, August 2018, I said, you know, we're going to do something different. I did not have a plan. So that's the one thing I always remind myself and I remind my students, if you can have a plan. um, it doesn't necessarily make it easier, but sometimes that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable with the big leap that you're going to take. So I left and I said, well, let's think of something different. And I started volunteering, right? I just started kind of getting myself out there. I did volunteer at some hospitals, some other school institutions. And then I became a substitute teacher. I cannot tell you how many advisors that I've spoken with who have kind of gone like in that same direction
Mhm.
where they thought maybe I want to teach. And that's kind of where they started. Um, I always like to talk about my substitute teaching experience because it was very short lived, but I actually got to substitute in the same district that I grew up in. So I went to my old middle school, I went to my old high school, saw some of the teachers who taught me. And that was really my way to just decide what did I want to do in education.
Mhm.
Did I want to teach, you know, at the secondary level and get my initial teacher certification? Did I want to do something totally different? I really liked that. Substitute teaching was interesting. I think all of us can remember some of our substitute teachers. I took it very seriously though.
Mhm.
So as far as I was concerned, I was your teacher. I was not your substitute. I was your teacher for the day. And so I was very diligent when it came to lesson plans and just thinking, you know, what would the teacher of this class want to have happen today?
Yeah.
And that was really, really helpful because it allowed me to realize that's not what I wanted to do every day. It just wasn't. I knew I wanted to teach and work with students, but just not necessarily at that level. What was also great about being a substitute was the flexibility with my schedule. So I could pick what days and times I was going to work. And if I did have another job opportunity come up, I could just be like, all right, I got to go to this, right?
Mhm.
And that's exactly what happened. So Valencia College was always on my radar as kind of an institution that I was interested in. And I just started applying. So I would apply for any and everything that I could find on their site. And I applied for a role and they called me and said, hey, Isabel, we'd like to talk to you. I went and I had the conversation. There was a presentation component to it. I was feeling it. It was great. And I didn't get the job. So, needless to say, I was a little bit disappointed. But some folks that were on that hiring committee said, you know, you didn't get this job, but would you be interested in being an academic advisor? And it clicked. That same experience that I had when I was in my undergrad program, I said, I wanted to be an advisor then.
Mhm.
Someone is asking me now if I want to be an advisor. The answer is yes. The nice thing, too, is that since Valencia is a state college, they did not require a master's degree. So just a bachelor's degree, preferably in psychology, education, all the things that I didn't have.
Mhm.
Right. And I went in and I said that. I said, you do realize I don't have the paper that you're looking for. I don't have that particular major. And they said, that's okay. And I just kind of really focused on the fact that even though I didn't study that, I knew that this was what I wanted to do. And so, of course, they said, all right, we'll talk to you if we have some interest. I said, okay. And I got called for the second interview, and here I am. So, almost 3 years later, I started in May 2019. So, almost 3 years later, I am here and I love it. This is exactly where I should be. So, working in higher ed has been the best thing for me. And I love it.
Yeah, I knew I was gonna like this story. I knew it. And there's so much in there, even kind of talking about when, you're getting your degree, you talk to your academic advisor. They're like, are you sure? Because, for them, it was probably like, we've spent so much time, talking about this one major, going through classes, making sure you were on track. And then now you're thinking, I want to do something else.
Mhm.
But it makes me think of, even when I was a student or students that I meet with where, we expect them to declare a major when they when they start at the university.
Right.
And then, and they're just most of them just coming right out of high school,
Mhm.
and they really haven't experienced much or really gotten to test the waters with things.
Yeah.
But for you, like, you knew at that very end when you were graduating, like, I want to do something in higher ed. I want to do something as an academic advisor. And then to go into health services and be in there for 6 years, but in the back of your mind, always thinking like, I want to be doing something with students and working with students. And then kind of got to that with the substitute teaching, but then eventually got to what you, in a way, kind of almost like truly meant to do,
Yeah.
being an advisor. Um, and it just made me think, even with the substitute teaching, like you're going in, you have, maybe 30 some students per period, and how many of them are taking it, oh, we have the
Right.
substitute teacher, let me be serious, and I'm going to learn something, versus, oh, they're just here for the time being temporarily until
Yeah.
the actual teacher comes back. um, how was that with the substitute teaching? Like, did you feel like you were able to connect and engage with the students, or was there, did you feel like there was some pushback from some students?
Yeah, I absolutely love talking about my experience with substitute teaching. So I was very intentional, and I would only pick classes that were either the middle school or the high school level, and specifically English classes. I absolutely love English. It is my favorite subject. So English, language arts. I think in some cases they also called it reading. So in that sense, I felt like I had a lot of control and I could go in and not feel like a fish out of water, right? I would never pick a math class to substitute for, because if you ask me a question, I don't have that answer. So I felt comfortable going in, right, for those English and language arts classes, because remember, at that point, I was thinking, I'm going to become a teacher. I'm going to become a teacher at the middle school or the high school level. So let me just get some practice. As far as pushback, yeah, of course. There are students who come in and that's what they're waiting for, right? They're like,
Yeah.
okay, Mrs. So and so is not here today. It's a sub. I actually didn't allow them to call me a sub, right?
Mhm.
No, my name is Isabelle, preferably Miss Saint Joy. So you have to set those parameters. And I think once I was able to do that and kind of gain their respect and a lot of their trust too, right? Trust me to actually continue your education today. Within the first 5 minutes, either you have it or you don't. Not gonna lie, there were some classes where I didn't have it, right? And that was just maybe the structure of the class, or
Mhm.
just the combination of personalities in that class that day. But for the most part, I would definitely say, once I got into like my second week of picking up classes, I was really feeling it. I was very happy that there were some teachers who reached back out to me and say, "Hey, Isabel, could you come in and sub my class again? I'm going to be out on this date, and we would love to have you back." I was intentional also in the fact that I just wanted these students to know, like, it doesn't matter who's standing at the front of the classroom. You know what you should be learning today. And we're just going to continue that. We're just going to make sure that you're getting everything that you need. I'll never forget one of the classes that I substituted for. I substituted several times. I think about 3 or 4 times that I went in for this teacher. He had some workshops that he was going to, and he was like, "Hey, I know this is coming up. Can you be available?" And it was actually for an international baccalaureate English class. And I was in IB as well in high school. So that was like, oh, yes, I can't wait. And he would actually send me that information ahead of time and say, hey, this is what they're going to be going over. And I appreciated that so much because I could go in and really just have all of these tools in my back pocket to continue their education. That was the biggest thing for me. You know, I was in there, we were having class discussions. I was asking them, what did they think? What did they learn? How important does this feel to them? You know, what do they think might show up on an exam moving forward? How are they going to apply this to their final IB exam? So I really, really just made it a point to just be the teacher, right? Not be the substitute teacher, but just be the teacher. And these are also students that some of them wanted to build a rapport with me. So if they saw me again substituting for another class, hey, Miss St. Joy, right? I told them at the beginning of class, hey, you just have to remember one name. You guys know each other, but I'm going to do my best to remember your names as well. So I think when we go into any situation where we're working with students, just reminding them of their value, right? Reminding them that they are valuable, their education is valuable, and being super, super present. So to answer your question, yeah, there are a couple classes that I'm like, I'm not going to get through to these young people today. But there were a lot more classes where I did feel like there was an influence, and there was a level of empowerment for me, like just kind of that confirmation. You should be talking to students as well. Like, this is what you should be doing. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then how much of that translates into academic advising, like the trust, the building rapport,
Mm-hmm.
being in the present,
Yep.
asking questions, having those discussions with them. And I know a lot of your points of interest with advising revolve around developmental advising and empowering students. How do you feel you implement that with your students?
Oh, well, as an academic advisor, so a general academic advisor, I do not have a cohort. So I do not have students who are assigned to me, who know, okay, Isabelle is my person. But I do have a lot of students who maybe after that first conversation with me feel really comfortable, and end up coming back, right? So making another appointment with me, or maybe the first time I met them was virtually and they're like, can I meet you in person? I'm like, of course, yes. So when it comes to the developmental side of advising, being a listener is so, so important. Being a good listener is critical. I think when we get to the point where we're not listening just to respond, right? We're listening to actually help you get through something. I think that's what students really, really appreciate. And especially in the virtual world that we've all kind of been thrown into, it is so, so easy for us to get caught up in, I'm just going to give you the answer, right? I'm going to give you the link that you need, or I'm going to give you the piece of paper that you need. But there's that extra element of like, that student just shared something with me that maybe they didn't have to, right? They shared a hardship, or they shared something that has just been bothering them, right? Or something they're really excited about. So it doesn't always have to be that we're listening for the negative, but I think just being a good and effective listener has really helped me to just make sure that when I respond to students that I'm doing so in a way that is comforting. And I think that's a lot of the reason that even though I don't have a cohort, I've got more students than I can count who are in my inbox, and on my schedule of appointments. And I'm all for it. I love that. That makes me feel like I am being effective. And I think that's one of the things as an advisor that no one really teaches you that part. No one really teaches you that feeling and what you need to do to get to that point of feeling effective. We can talk to you about the catalog. We can talk to you about, hey, this is when to give an override and when not to. But that element of this is how you become effective, you learn that over time. And I think one of the biggest pieces has just been being a good listener.
Yeah, and I think that listening piece, though, it's something we always have to focus on every day, because I think sometimes we can just go through the motions and nod our head, but in our mind we're
Mhm.
thinking about, I need to get this email done, this project done, and then the student's halfway done answering your question that you initially asked, and you're like, what did they say? And then you're trying to put the pieces together. So it's very much being very intentional and just kind of having that daily reminder that, okay, I need to be in the present and be this active listener, because my student might be saying something that I didn't expect, but they're sharing something personal, and maybe I can help them with that.
Yeah, and I also thought about, because I've been listening to every episode that I can now. Eduardo Mendoza.
Yeah, my
Oh,
boss.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. When he quoted Maya Angelou, I said, this is the best podcast ever. Like, it was already the best, but it was like the absolute best. Maya Angelou is my favorite writer. And he mentioned her very, very fabulous quote: people might forget what you said. People might forget what you looked like, but people will always, always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And if you are a good listener, I guarantee you're going to make somebody feel so good. And that's why they come back. And I that's a big deal for me because, again, as we have become more virtual, it has become just so much easier to almost be passive and almost, in some cases, maybe be dismissive. That
Yeah.
is not what advising is about.
Yeah.
I've had this conversation with friends of mine in advising as well. We have to make sure that it doesn't become transactional, that we're not just at a store and you're purchasing an item, you're giving me the money, I'm giving you the receipt. We have to really think about all those pieces in between. And I think just listening and remembering how people are going to feel when we do give them that feedback, very, very important. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so I've known Ed for over 18 years. And from the very beginning that I've known him, he's always brought up that quote.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, he definitely like lives and breathes that quote. And it's one where like I'm glad every time he brings it up, because it's, to me, like I might lose focus, and then to hear it, I'm like, okay, why am I here? You know,
Mm-hmm.
why am I in this position? Why am I with these students?
Yeah.
So it's definitely a daily reminder of sorts. And but yeah, I like how you were talking about the transactional in terms of going into the store and purchasing something, you know, because there are going to be some of those where a student's going to walk in, it's like, I just need that form, you
Yeah.
know, and it's like, cool, got it. But for a lot of it, you know, it could even be just asking that question of like, oh, so tell me more about why you're looking for this form. And
Mm-hmm.
that might turn into a different conversation. And then it
Yeah.
turns out, hey, there's this other form you might need as well. Or maybe we schedule an appointment and we talk more about this other situation. So
Exactly.
yeah, a lot of it's just, you know, asking that initial question, and you could have a totally different conversation.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, do you also work with dual enrollment high school students?
I do. So, Valencia College, of course, has several different campuses. I happen to be on the Lake Nona campus. So, if you're ever in the area, hello. But yeah, we are right next door to Lake Nona High School, and they are pretty much always here all the time. So, we have the largest dual enrollment student population at the Lake Nona campus. So, yes, working with them is fantastic. It's a very different dynamic sometimes, but wonderful population of students for sure.
Wonderful. And speaking of working with students, so you've done various workshops and presentations for your students, and two of them I wanted to highlight and talk to you about. One was called, it had to do with imposter syndrome. So it's called Imposter Syndrome, the voice saying you cannot when you know you can. Um, how did that workshop come about, and how did that go?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're referencing one of our skill shops at Valencia College, which is just a fantastic opportunity for our staff and our faculty to just kind of talk to our students about all things non-academic. That is like a very, very strict rule. We're not talking about catalogs, things in here. But yeah, that particular workshop, oh boy, that stemmed, I'm going to be honest, but this is a safe space. That stemmed from my own feelings of imposter syndrome, my own kind of battle with, I'll say it again, right? Valencia hired me as an academic advisor, and I didn't have the specific piece of paper that they were looking for. So even though I've been in this role for a while, there are instances where I feel like, is someone going to find out like I'm not a real academic advisor? And that was important for me to share, even with our students. You know, sometimes they may have these wonderful aspirations, things that they want to do, big dreams, and they can. They absolutely can. But there's that voice saying, maybe you can't. Or maybe you think you can, or maybe you think you can start it, but there's no way you're going to finish it. So that was very, very important for me to share with our students that you've got to fight against that. And in doing so, you can't just do it alone, right? You're going to have to really put some effort into creating those positive voices that are going to be louder than the imposter syndrome one. You have to really be mindful. There will be things that you can't do, but it's not because you can't do them, right? It's because you can't do them yet. It's
Yep.
because maybe there's that additional step you need to take. And I think that's a big part of fighting against imposter syndrome, reminding yourself, you just have to work hard. Whatever it is you want, just work really, really hard to get there. But sometimes there are times where you need to just reevaluate. So I think a lot of our STEM students,
Mhm.
I want to be a doctor, I want to be an engineer. Perfect. Let's talk about how we get there. There will be times where you realize maybe that's not the direction for me to go in. So that's very different than imposter syndrome, right? Imposter syndrome says you can't do something that you absolutely should be.
Mhm.
Realizing though that maybe I need to make a change is very different. And so I really wanted to just focus on that piece, and remind our students that you all are wonderful rock stars, and you can do anything. And you just have to have other folks that are in your corner on your team.
Yeah. Because I think the voices on both sides are always going to be there, but it's like you're saying, you want the one that's the more positive one that's kind of going to be louder than
Hmm.
the negative voices. But it's knowing that you're going to have someone, it's like the angel and devil on the shoulders, and each person's going to tell you something different. But uh, going back to Ed, my boss, he's always said, any skill can be learned.
Yep.
It's just finding someone that will teach it to you or learn it on your own. But you can't really teach being a good human being or someone that cares, and those are going to be those skills that you really kind of have to already have. And
Hmm.
then you can learn everything else on the way.
Yeah.
And so with this particular workshop, it was it was about like, is the major right for you? Are you considered college material? And you kind of then connected it to like even based off your own experience. So now you've been an advisor for almost 3 years now. Do you feel you're still dealing with that, or it's not as much as it was 3 years ago?
Yeah, I always feel like imposter syndrome tends to be very residual, right? So
Hmm.
you can get to a point where it's not as strong, but I definitely feel like there are instances where it just kind of creeps in. It's like, hey, you sure you can do that, Isabel? Um, so I definitely would say it is not as strong, and that voice is certainly not as loud,
Hmm.
especially as I kind of just develop my own advising style, right? And as I think more intentionally about how do my students view me,
Hmm.
right? Because if I'm thinking just about how I view myself, I'm always going to remind myself, Isabel, you don't have the piece of paper. But when I think about my students, right, when I think about my peers, those who are working with me, how do they view me? Do they view me as a resource? Do they view me as effective? And so when I think about that, it helps so much, just to kind of have that reminder that I, I could do this. I should be here. Okay. And I think that helps. And it just reminds you that even if you feel like you're not going in the right direction, keep working on it. Um, and there are skills that you can learn. There are
Hmm.
skills that you can always get better at too. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of like it'll creep up on you. And I know for me, a lot of times when that happens, I'll think back to when I started as an advisor in 2013, because I almost quit within the first month because I came from admissions and and that was more transactional. I would
Hmm.
say with a lot of what we were doing. It's like, okay, review transcript. Do they have requirements met? Admit, deny. And you might meet with the student to go over requirements, but we never really went past that in terms of like, well, tell me about you and what you want to do and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And so when I got to this position, and one of my first few students was, they're dealing with so many issues at home, and you know these negative things have happened, and I'm like, oh my god, what do I even say? I don't
Yeah.
know. Wait, what resource do we have on campus? And I felt like I got an F on that appointment,
Oh.
if I had to get graded. But then it made me learn, okay, if I'm in this situation again, what are some things I could say and learn? And a lot of it was just, as I went, then I'm learning from experience, but then also setting in with other advisors, asking them questions, and then just trying to get as much information so I can apply it and then be able to apply that in my appointment. So I kind of think back to, okay, where did I start and where am I at now?
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, well, now I'm going into almost 8 years of this, being an academic advisor. So I'm like, okay, I think I know a thing or two, but
Yeah.
there's still a lot more that I need to learn and will be learning. And I like how you put, at the end of those sentences, just say yet. because
Yeah.
you haven't learned it yet, but you will if you keep applying yourself and pushing yourself. And I think connected to that goes into one of the other Skillsoft presentations that you did, and that was, who do you want to be when you grow up? And I feel like part of that maybe even connects to like your journey into where you're at now. Can you talk more about that Skillsoft or
Yeah.
Skill Shop, I should say?
No, no
Yeah.
problem. Absolutely. So that one was, again, one that I was like, what can I actually talk about and not have a script?
Yeah.
What can I address and have students just kind of hear someone in this role and realize, ooh, that wasn't like a straight line. Like that, everything wasn't perfect. I think a lot of times our students might have the perception, okay, this person has all the answers. This person knows everything. So they've known what they needed to do from day one. And that's not the case. Well, maybe in some cases, but that wasn't my case. And so that particular skill shop, I focused a lot on who's telling you what to be,
Mhm.
right? And the emphasis in that was you should be the one choosing who you are going to be in the future.
Mhm.
And I know that that's not always the case. I talk with students all the time. I mean, frankly, I have students in here with parents sometimes,
Mhm.
who are just saying, "Well, I my mom wants me to be," or mom is actually, interjecting and saying, "Well, she would like to," and it's a little bit disheartening. I get it. I understand where that influence is coming from because it's kind of just this encouragement. I want the best for you.
Yeah.
But that skill shop was really meant to just help students think about themselves, and not consider that to be selfish. Because at the end of the day, once you get into that major and once you get into that career, you are the one that's clocking in and clocking out every day,
Yeah.
right? You are the one who is experiencing that. And I just wanted to help students realize that you can change your mind. You don't necessarily have to follow what someone else is asking you to do.
Mhm.
And you just have to make sure you have a plan. So if you're saying, no, mom and dad, I don't want to be a doctor, what do you want to do instead? Right. And how are you going to help them to realize, I want to do this instead because these are my strengths,
Mhm.
right? Or I know what my weaknesses are, and that's something I have to be able to do in that career, and I can't do that, or I'm not ready to do that. So that skill shop was more so think about yourself, and realize that it's okay to have your own pathway. And of course, I shared my own experience a little bit in there. I try for those to be more interactive. So, not so much just Isabel talking, but mostly students, talking about their experience. And it was crazy because they're all kind of on the Padlet. I love Padlet, by the way. Or they're in the chat box and they're like, yeah, my mom wants me to do this. My dad wants me to do that, but I don't think I can do that. Or I have no idea what career I want to follow. I don't know who I want to be when I grow up. I'm not ready to grow up. So it was just really, really nice to kind of see that sense of community. And I think that helped a lot of them too to realize it's okay if you don't know.
Mhm.
And students don't always feel like that's an appropriate response. And I think as advisors, we have to tell them it's okay to feel that way, right? There are resources that you can use and ways that you can get to that answer if you don't have it yet. But you just have to tell us that. And I think sometimes students are afraid to tell us that. So again, I really like that skill shop because students just got to really just free flow and chat and share their thoughts, share their ideas. And I was happy to kind of share my journey here too.
Yeah, and I like that with your skill shop, you had that time for students to really kind of just be open and share, but then that you weren't telling them this is what you need to do, because as you know, and working with a lot of students, a lot of it might be cultural based, like with their family, and their parents or guardians having an influence in terms of major or career options. So you gave the students some options in terms of like, here are some questions maybe to discuss
Mhm.
with your parents on that, versus like, no, do what you want and this is how you're gonna do it. So yeah, and so you kind of had a lot of great aspects of both of those skill shops. So I hope you continue doing those and you have a lot more that you're going to do, because it does seem like it does have a positive impact on your students.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, and so as we move on with the interview, I know for you, you're all about wanting to stay engaged, and it's something that you're very proactive about. So how have you been able to stay engaged at Valencia and maybe higher ed in general?
Yeah. Oh boy. So staying engaged is probably something that people around me are just tired of hearing because I talk about it all the time. It's so important. We perhaps if we have gotten really, really good at not making our conversations with students transactional, our
Mhm.
daily work might feel very routine, right? Okay, I know what class comes after Comp 1. I know what you need if you want to be an engineer. I know what you need if you want to be a theater major. So we know all of these things. And I think what makes it different and what makes it interesting is when we do get engaged and we're doing something that's outside of that routine. So some of the ways that I really keep myself focused and excited about the work that I do is just getting closer to Valencia, getting closer to the organization itself. We have a lot of excellent opportunities to participate in committees, which no one is forcing me to do that. I think that's the best part, right? No one's saying, hey, Isabel, you need to sign up for this.
Mhm.
Completely up to me. And those committees give me a chance, in some cases, to read scholarship essays from our students and think about, wow, I would have never heard that story in an advising session because maybe it's a student I would have never met. But now I know that there's at least one student experiencing this at Valencia. And opportunities like that, I would say never pass them up. There's another committee where, we're able to kind of think about staff members who would like to take leave, developmental leave, right? And kind of go on these experiences and have these opportunities to learn and professionalize. That was from one of the episodes with Craig McGill. Yeah. So professionalization, right? And that opportunity to just do things maybe outside of your advising work, but to grow as an advisor or to grow as any staff member. And so that committee allows us to kind of read through these different proposals and again decide, does this make sense? Does this add value to Valencia? Um, a hiring committee, right? That's another opportunity where no one is necessarily saying, hey, you need to do this, but it's a good chance for you to kind of see who are these individuals that we're bringing into the college? What kind of culture do we already have? And in listening to these interviews, is this someone who's going to add to that? Or is this someone who's going to change it up a little bit? Maybe we do need that kind of flavor. So those are the opportunities that I think when you take advantage of them, you get closer to the organization, you get a little bit further away from the actual work that you do too. And I think we need to do that sometimes. We need to get our heads outside of the catalog and outside of the daily routine just to
Mhm.
kind of think about how does this fit in the grand scheme of things. Back in November, we were having some graduation ceremony type things.
Mhm.
So we routinely only have one graduation ceremony for our fall, spring, and summer. And then, of course, pandemic, we haven't had a true in-person graduation in a while, but we've had kind of some other opportunities, right, where students could drive up with their family and they had a stage set up outside. They could walk the stage, have their name called, dressed up in their regalia, take fun pictures at the end of it. So I was there, in the morning, waving students in and their families, signing them in. And that helped me to remember, okay, Isabel, the 500 conversations you had this week about course selection lead to graduation. I may
Mhm.
have never advised any of those students, but the idea was that we, as a whole, as advisors,
Mhm.
when we say, hey, you should take these 3 classes during the summer, it ultimately gets you to the 60 credits. So I think just being engaged helps you to understand your work, comes full circle. And
Mhm.
it just helps you to appreciate that. So very, very important to me. One more piece of my engagement, which is part of Valencia, but I guess a little bit separate too. I am a mentor. So I'm a mentor for the Horizon Scholars program. And so that takes pretty much our staff and our faculty, and we have opportunities to mentor high school students,
Mhm.
not necessarily in dual enrollment, but just high school students in the community who are part of this wonderful program to get a scholarship at the end of the day. And it also encourages them just to volunteer, right? And stay involved as well. So that has also been a piece of the engagement for me that just helps so, so much. So I'm getting to see things at the end of the cycle. I'm getting to see things before the cycle, right? Who knows? My mentee could be a Valencia student in the future. You never know. So
Yeah.
it's important work, I think, that goes outside of what we do every day. And I think ultimately that's what keeps us happy, because courses, I guess they could keep you happy, but it's the work outside of that that really makes us remember this is important and this is special work for sure.
Yeah. And so, like you're saying, your mentee might end up going to Valencia, and who knows, you might end up being their advisor
You never
too.
know.
So, everything connects, goes full circle as
Yeah,
well. But I like how you're saying that, yeah, we need to sometimes take a step back from like our daily routine, because we can just get caught up in it, and we
mhm,
kind of have our blinders on, or we don't have the peripheral. And it's good to maybe step out, be on a committee of something, some other initiative,
yeah,
or even if it's not within your institution, maybe it's within like some other type of organization, but you're getting that extra fulfillment, because
exactly.
ultimately, like, what got you here won't necessarily keep you here, in a sense, and you always have to keep learning and kind of re-engaging in a way, in different ways. And so those opportunities are there. Sometimes you just got to look for it, and sometimes they just fall into your lap.
True.
So sometimes it's just there, and it's like, awesome. Don't need to go search, it's right there. um, Now, being an advisor, almost 3 years now, as an advisor. So were you like fairly new, like a year in advising when COVID hit?
Yes. So I share this all the time with folks. I have worked more from home than I have on campus. So May 2019, I started. And as the story goes, spring break 2020, which was March 2020, we went on spring break. And that following Monday, we were supposed to come back on campus. And they said, no, give us a week. We're just kind of assessing things, but we'll see you sometime in April probably. We weren't back on campus until August 2021. So I joke about it all the time. I'm like, I'm really a virtual advisor. Like, I'm not a real advisor. I'm a virtual advisor. But yeah, right around that time. So it's been interesting for sure, learning kind of both sides of it for sure.
Yeah, you kind of just get thrown into it and figure it out as you go.
Yeah.
And as we wind down with this interview, among everything else that you're doing, aside from advising and the other opportunities that you're doing and the committees that you're part of and being a mentor, I also understand you also have your own podcast. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I was never a real like podcast fan, but
Mhm.
for whatever reason, recently I just started thinking, it's important if you have a voice to share it, if you have an opinion to get it out there. And sometimes, we do that through writing. I love writing. Again, I love English, but there was just something captivating about listening to someone. And I started listening to podcasts myself, including Adventures in Advising. I said, oh, that looks fun. So, yes, I do have my own podcast. It's fairly new, it's a baby podcast, it's very, very new. But it is called Infused with Izzy, and Izzy is spelled ISZI. And it's just been an opportunity for me to think about some of the things that I've done for my own personal development, some things that I've done, like getting engaged and why that's important. But yeah, if anyone wants to check it out, feel free. Infused with Izzy. So a little bit of my thoughts on things that people have already been talking about, but just giving my perspective.
Nice. And where can listeners find your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts.
Awesome. Sounds good. And if anyone has any questions based off anything that you've answered, they want to connect, what's the best way for them to reach you?
I would give you my Valencia email, but we have all those little blocks and don't open this, don't open that. And I would hate to miss a message from
Yeah.
someone. So you are always welcome to reach me on my personal email, which is Isabelle, ISABELLE Saint Joy, SAINTJOY at outlook.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. This was a great interview. Loved it. And great. I'm looking forward to hearing more about as you continue on as an advisor, and then hopefully getting to see you at a conference soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again for the invitation. Again, I think it's just wonderful the work that you're doing. I believe Dr. Melinda Anderson had said that in her closing message last year. So I share the same sentiment, right? Just the fact that you have had so many amazing folks on this podcast of various levels, various experience, and to be one of those voices, I am incredibly thankful. So thank you again for having me. And yes, we will definitely continue to connect no matter what.
Sounds good. Take care.
All right. Bye bye.